like that warm paperwork. Remember when we were kids, we used to smell it, the Ditto paper?
Exactly. Yeah, miss it? No, I am miss because, oh, my name is
Try it.
And you saw move mailboxes, move seat right there. Things
But I didn't take any mail that belonged to you.
I was expecting $1 million.
Ooh, wasn't there?
for us, we were, remember that part, we were.
So, 18. We just started, 18 days in.
Happy New Year.
And the cutoff is if it's the first time you saw the person.
Is that it?
That's the cutoff.
Oh, well, I can't depend on my memory for that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Last week you passed them down. Last week you did.
I'd like to call to order the Schenectady City Council Committee meeting for Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. And so we'll start with the Public Safety Committee.
So I'd like to call to order the Public Safety Committee. On tonight's agenda, we have one item. There's a discussion for reducing barriers to the Schenectady Fire Department. And I'll be spoken to by Mr. Farley.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so currently in Schenectady, the fire department requires all applicants to complete 60 college credit course, which means that right now the requirement is in order for to be a firefighter, you must be a paramedic. After talking with Assistant Chief Moreno here and having some pretty candid conversations, and he just has a wealth of knowledge. We're trying to kind of look at this and say, we want the highest skilled, qualified people working in these very important positions. How do we be intentional about increasing access and opportunity to become a firefighter in Schenectady? And we're kind of thinking about and having some conversations about how do we open up the access, but at the same time, maintaining and increasing, the safety of the residents that live here in the city of Schenectady. So, like I said, we're just kind of in the early parts of the conversation, but I want to bring it up here and get some input and invite everyone else into the conversation about how do we do that in a way that maintains that standard, because we're not into lowering standards. That's not a place that we can afford to do so, but maybe look at the order of right now you can't even fire department's not going to talk to you unless you're a paramedic right now, how it's written. But is there ways that we can kind of maintain that expectation throughout your employment and time here with the firefighters? And there's also some interest from our Schenectady City School District and SEC about doing some pilot public safety tracks to kind of expose some of the youth to what it's like to be a firefighter and or law enforcement in the city of Schenectady. So that's just kind of where we're at right now. But
Assistant Chief to speak?
Yes. And I want to acknowledge the Assistant Chief Don is here. Again, we're just if you wanted to share any thoughts about that.
Yeah, Chief, could you come up and explain what it currently is to become a firefighter in the city? Oh, now you just deputized him. It's just like that.
I just deputized him.
I see.
Everybody okay if I take this off? And
Yeah.
I mumble, my wife says so.
Okay.
Okay, so currently, the process is, we request civil service to make an announcement for another test of the civil service exam, which we currently have one active. That's going to close in January 31st. It's been open since the 1st, goes to January 31st. The test will be March 19th. In order to take the test, you have to be a resident of Schenectady County or the contingent counties. That's number one. Number two, you have to be 20 years old. And number three, you have to hold an EMT card. And then you'll be able to sit for the test. After you take the test, you bring all your qualifications to civil service, they keep track, and you won't get an interview with the city, with the fire department, unless you have 60 college credits and you have a paramedic card, and also you pass the physical agility test. Those are the three qualifications. At that point, if you're still qualified, then we would invite those people in for an interview. After the interview, if you move beyond that, we send you for a physical, for a mental health check, and fingerprints, and a background check. And if all that goes well, then we'll talk about employment.
Thank you, Chief. Is that all, Mr. Farley? All right, any questions from fellow council members? Mr. Williams?
Chief, could you tell us a little bit about, in terms of the, for example, you had the open house a few weeks ago, and some of the other initiatives that you currently have underway to try to be recruiting, especially from within our city?
Yeah, we prefer to hire within the city for numerous reasons. So we've targeted all our recruitment efforts within the city. We use Facebook, which may go a little bit outside the city, but so we use Facebook. We've had an ad campaign, billboards. We've spoken to the media. Many of our media partners have run different articles. We've done interviews that way. Spoken to all neighborhood groups, talking to other groups that operate within the city. So all our efforts have been targeted within the city. prior to COVID, I think I mentioned this one the last time I was here, that this is all short-term plans.
Mhm.
Long-term plans, we want to get in, within the city schools, to kind of plant the seed for the young people coming up, that let them think that this could be an option for them. That's more of a long-term game. And because of COVID, it got sidelined. We're now in conversation with several people to try to make that a possibility. That's long-term.
Any other questions? Ms. Torres?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So, Chief, the qualifications that are set now, how long have they been in place for firefighters, paramedics here in the city?
Exactly where we're doing it now, I'm going to guess about 20 years.
And where do you think our ranking is, statewide or nationally even, as far as us being such a great fire department paramedic unit with the qualifications that we set for our firefighters and paramedics?
I think we're not only regionally recognized, state recognized, and then also nationally. There have been articles about us within some of the career magazines, Firehouse and Fire Engineer. So we're very well respected. It's a very, very efficiently run department. We can go into details, but I'm not going to get deep in the woods here. We do nearly 20,000 calls, and we have 117 paramedics. And when you start comparing that to other departments, they don't compare. They do a good job, but they don't compare to what we do. Which, on certain calls, maybe a very recent call, it's extremely important to have that level of care. When things are going south, things are going bad, you want to make sure you have your highest level of care there, which we did on the call I'm thinking about.
Mhm.
Thank you for all you do. Thank you so much.
Ms. Torres?
So right now you have, so every firefighter is a paramedic.
Yes, ma'am.
So when you were initially talking, you said in order to take the test, they only have to have their EMT card.
Right, they can be 20 years old.
20 years old,
and
right.
To be appointed, you have to be 21 years old,
Okay.
have a paramedic card.
So, okay, between taking the test and actually applying, they have to have finished those
Correct.
60 credits.
Which a lot of people, they'll take it as an EMT
Mhm.
as they're pursuing their paramedic card.
Okay, that was, okay, so,
And then when they get that card, they go to civil service, they present it there, civil service updates their qualifications.
okay. And, the other question is, because I talked to Ben, and I can't remember his last name.
To who?
Ben?
Ben.
Yes.
Yep.
Do you, or, we talked about perhaps having like a cadet program, sort of like the police do, but for younger people who want to, who may want to become firefighters.
To have a what, I'm sorry?
Like a cadet program?
Cadet program.
Yes. Mhm. So is that something, is that what you're talking about when you talk about the schools, or is that something different?
No, that would be, I wouldn't call it a cadet program, but it would be an opportunity to speak to young people, have them see us on a regular basis. So they see, I'm not Fireman Don, I'm just Don, and this is what I do for a living.
Okay.
And you plant the seed.
Okay.
That's a long-term goal because those individuals would be 16, 17, 18. They couldn't take the test,
Mhm.
but they could go to EMT school, paramedic school, and get their, get exposed to it and see if it's something. It's career, it's not for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, stories. So it's my understanding that Hudson Valley Community College has the type of program that someone would need to go through. I
Yeah, the
think,
paramedic
right?
program.
The paramedic program.
So let's go.
There's lots of scholarships, there's lots of financial aid available to folks that choose to go to Hudson Valley. So in terms of the affordability of going through the paramedic program, that sort of is helped by the financial, first of all, the low tuition, but secondly, I know that I know the scope of the scholarship potential that the community colleges offer. do we get a lot of folks that go through that program, or are there folks going through other programs? And then could you also speak a little bit about the kind of the physicality of what also is required in terms of, I'm certainly not going to be someone that's going to be able to get on a roof at 2 o'clock in the morning in an ice storm, kind of thing. But the kind of physical training, the mechanical ability in terms of some of the, I know when I did my ride along and toured the fire departments, just the kinds of things that our firefighters have to do to maintain our equipment. So basically the program, access to that program at Hudson Valley, just your thoughts on that, as well as the physical nature and the mechanical aptitude that someone would need.
We had our open house, I think it was December 10th, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And at the open house, we had a representative from Hudson Valley. Gentleman came, they've been very good to us, very helpful. They assist us in the way that we need. And when he came in, we asked specifically, because we had some people come through, we asked specifically about opportunities, financial opportunities. And he did confirm what we thought, that there are those. But those are on an individual basis. Person would have to go and, they talk about it to see exactly where they would fit. Those opportunities are there. I'm being told there are other opportunities maybe for people that need assistance. And I don't know all of them. Hudson Valley and Copelskill run a paramedic program. There's a day course and a night course. The day course takes approximately a year. The night course is a little slower pace, so it'll take 2 years. And both Hudson Valley and Copelskill offer both of those. And the third one.
Well, about the physical nature in terms of that training as well, and the mechanical aspects.
Yeah.
What someone would need to know.
So this is a blue collar job. There are many aspects to the career, just besides, putting the wet stuff on red stuff. It's a little bit more complicated.
Oh, yeah.
And if a person has mechanical ability, it's going to assist them. And we get people from all walks of life, all ways, all different, they're on different places, right? Some people are very strong here, maybe a little weak there. When we get them, we train them to where they need to be. We work with them. Some go quicker, some take a little more work. But to get somebody that has that mechanical skill or whatever, we're dealing with heating issues, furnaces, right? We're dealing with water issues. We're dealing with medical issues. We're dealing with hazmat issues,
Right.
weapons of mass destruction. We cover
Right.
all. And not everyone's going to come in with all those skills, so we have to train them, and we do that. As far as physically, it is a physical job. It's a young person's job. You go from 0 to 60 in a matter of seconds. Several years ago, one of the news stations did a study. They put somebody on a monitor, and they just were with them all day long, all the different things they were doing. And they watch your heart rate be at about 55, 60, 64, whatever. We call it the bell, it's not the bell anymore, but when the call comes in, this person's heart rate went from 60 to 120 in about 20 seconds, and I'm not exaggerating. It's just, so that alone takes its toll. So now you're doing whatever, complaining about Moreno's chicken farm. That was good to see. And the next thing you know, 3 minutes later, you're crawling through smoke and flames going for that child that's up in the second floor. It takes a toll. So there's, physicality is a major part of it.
So, definitely appreciate all the comments. Chief Marino, simply put, not to belabor the topic, over the course of your tenure as a firefighter, would you say recruitment has risen, stayed the same, or declined?
You mean in numbers?
Correct.
It has declined.
Great. So, I definitely appreciate our conversations that we've had on the topic. I think it's apparent from everyone that's been in the room that something needs to change. I appreciate Mr. Farley's comments and also bringing up this agenda item. But I think you hit it on the head, Chief Marino, where we have to measure our short-term or long-term benefits and what direction we seek for the Schenectady Fire Department. I definitely understand that unfortunately there may be some adverse impacts that are prohibiting people from submitting their applications, unbeknownst to scholarship grants or opportunities. I know for me personally, working in employment sometimes takes an onus over individuals' career aspirations, but I appreciate all the efforts you've done to get in front of this issue, because we need to make sure that we continue to staff our fire department to the best of its abilities, especially to meet these demanding criteria that you've alluded to tonight. So what I would love to see is having members from our local institutions come to include our colleges and also high schools to be able to collaboratively get around this issue, to make sure that we have a pipeline in place so that we are targeting individuals, to also include potentially curtailing some of the initial requirements, not from the standpoint of lowering our expectations, but just to make sure that we have the people and the right people skilled to perform our duties. So I would like to see this put back on for another 2 weeks.
I have another question.
Ms. Porter?
Is there an upper age limit?
Sorry?
Is there an upper age limit that you can, like after you get to age 35, you can no longer, so it's, as long as you're physically fit, you can actually, and have everything else in place at this moment? There's no cutoff age limit, as long as you can pass the physical test?
I'm using myself as an example.
No, but you already
I'm
can.
still here.
No, I don't mean, is there an age, do you have to age
No,
out
I
at some
don't.
point?
Yeah.
But,
No, there's no age.
no, there's no, okay,
Right.
well, that's good to know.
Carl, Mayor McCarthy.
Just when you're talking about recruitment, you have to, where the numbers have gone down, you know, one time we staffed a department with an excess of, I think, of 150 people. Today we have budgeted 117 firefighters, some of the command staff. We're normally looking for 3, 4, 5 people a year to fill the slot. So it's not necessarily quantity, it's quality, and matching up those individuals who have the interest and the skill set to do the job. Because of COVID and other things where we put a hiring freeze, I think we're down now 9 firefighters.
We're down 7 right now. By the end of January, we'll be down 9.
Some
And then we'll be
retirements
down
that are
11.
coming out, so it's a little bit unusual now, but it's to, again, reach out and get people to come in, and it's, how do you identify just the 1 or 2 individuals? Sometimes the shotgun where you want 100 is not really what you're looking for. You're looking for somebody that has that skill set. And Schenectady was the first really to offer a paramedic program. We're right now the first that is doing some of the telemedicine. So we're putting more responsibility in doing more, and it's also, you look at the revenue side, to get reimbursed for some of the work that we do, where some of the stuff is not today reimbursable. The only thing we get some ALS calls, advanced life support. The BLS calls, basic life support, just under the insurance reimbursement, we don't get anything. Where we're looking now to leave patients in place and do other support, diagnostic treatment, evaluation. It's how do you shift that model for reimbursement and improving not only the outcome, but just the convenience of treating people so that they're getting the appropriate level of care, where they may not need the full suite of services at an emergency room. It may be an urgent care center, maybe getting it scheduled with a doctor or some other medical provider in a reasonable period of time. And so you're looking at recruitment. It's also the whole delivery of service model is starting to shift here in Schenectady, is leading in that. And it's a substantial commitment. When I hire a firefighter, I'm making a commitment on behalf of the city of Schenectady for about $3.5 million, almost $4 million in today's dollars of what they will pay during their career in the retirement benefits that we provide to them.
I'm sorry.
Well, before you, my response would just be similar to the military and their recruitment platforms. You would traditionally go to the high schools that breed recruits just to save time and just economics of scale. But what systematically happened is you would be not appealing to other communities. So just looking at the situation from a different perspective to ensure that everyone is given the opportunity, because communication is dual responsibilities to make sure that we're doing our part to make sure that these announcements and opportunities are afforded to everyone. But I think Ms. Patrick, I went first.
What do you think first?
Oh, no, I was just kind of gonna piggyback on that to say, like, you know, as we, I'm really proud of the steps that the city's taking, you know, in innovative ways of service delivery. I think is something that is going to be key moving forward. So I think that just really amplifies the importance of partnering with city school district and other educational institutions to, you know, so we're casting a wider net. At the same time, we are not only maintaining, but really we're increasing, you know, that requirement of skill level and skill set, and we get a larger pool of qualified applicants to select from. And I think that just really makes us a stronger, safer community. So again, I commend the efforts, and I really appreciate the steps that we're taking as a city. And I think this is something that we should continue to do.
Ms. Patrick?
I just wanted to say as a closing comment that I think that we're just so fortunate here in our city and in the county, because obviously we're also out on all those calls as well. And the fact that when our folks show up, and most, you know, a lot of times it's a medical call, we're going to have all paramedics that are going to be able to provide those services. And those are life-saving services. And at that level, as opposed to an EMT, which, I mean, there's just so many more things that a paramedic is allowed to do in terms of administering an IV, administering medication. I mean, they are really saving lives. And we're fortunate for that. I think with the telemedicine piece, again, you know, to be able to have a paramedic on the other end of that is going to benefit all of us as well. So I appreciate that we have the standards that we have in place, and I'm happy to not see any change in that as we continue to do the kind of recruiting that we do. So I just wanted to commend you for that and say thank you to all of our firefighters, because it really is to our benefit that we have such a highly skilled force.
Thank you.
So thank you.
If
So-
I may, I'm
Can I
sorry.
just ask a question though, because you said the paramedics, I thought, don't we have doctors on the other end with telemedicine?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought that the paramedics also.
Well, paramedics are in the field.
Right, but the doctor is the guy answering the questions, back wherever he is. Okay.
Depending on the fact pattern of the call, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was our.
I just
thought
wanted-
that our folks were taking those calls.
So, like the mayor said, our paramedics work with the doctor on the other side of the iPad.
Gotcha.
And they want paramedics on our side.
Mhm.
Training level, schooling, in EMT is approximately 8 weeks, and paramedic is close to a year.
Yep,
So that it's night and day.
yep.
And if I may say one more thing, every solution creates other challenges. So we've had some really good conversation, and we've talked about that. There's no one panacea to this. There's a lot of ways Chief likes to say, we know we're here, here's where we want to go, how are we doing it?
Mhm.
And there's
Exactly.
the challenge.
I guess just in closing, I want to just reiterate for anyone to be clear that in no way are we looking to lower the standard of care for the people of the city of Schenectady. This is one of our, strong points of the community that we want to build on. So it's quite the opposite of that. So I just want to make sure that we're all clear and understanding that it's right to your point. We know where we're at, we know where we want to get, and where we want to get does not include a lower standard of care. It includes a higher standard of care. And so how do we get that? And that's where the direction of the conversation is going. So thank you for your time.
Cool. Thank you for your time, Chief.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
in regards to the motion, what's an appropriate timeline to keep this on, in your opinion? Just to reevaluate it. 30 seconds.
Yeah, maybe
60 days. Right, if I can get a motion to readdress.
No, you don't need a motion.
I don't think you need
You don't have to
that.
need a motion to do that, we can just bring it back. Just bring it back.
Right, Martin? Right, can I get a motion?
To adjourn, or are you asking for anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
I apologize. Is there any other topics of discussion to come forward to the committee?
Motion to,
If I can get a motion to adjourn, second?
Second.
All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Call to order the Finance Committee, and the first item is the 2022 HUD Emergency Solution Grant, COVID-19, CARES of New York, Inc. Ms. Kristen Diaz.
Good evening, everyone. This request is in relation to our emergency solutions grant that was awarded through the CARES Act as part of the coronavirus pandemic, the CARES Act. So this request is coming from the YWCA, and they are looking to basically just move funding from what was allocated. So originally when this was allocated, it was kind of speculation on what was going to be the highest need. So they've seen an increase in need for emergency shelter here. And so the request is basically to move $40,000 to the emergency shelter line from the rapid rehousing line. And so we are just requesting a resolution accepting this change to move the funding to emergency shelter.
Any questions? Amen. We have a motion.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The next item you are requesting that it be moved?
Yes,
Hold-
we're going to
sorry.
bring that back in 2 weeks. When they have a couple more requests.
Okay,
So-
thank you. The next item is authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Saratoga Associates for design service related to the construction of the new pool at Central Park using ARPA funds. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going to get general discussions on this swimming pool. This would be to retain Saratoga Associates and have Aquatica, who did a presentation, function as a subcontractor with the architectural firm to start to do the design work and preliminary layout for the pool. This would include community engagement, some of the other ancillary potential projects that may happen with the A-Diamond, with tennis courts, and I don't know, Chris, are there any other things that would be in the scope of the works?
Yeah, we're looking at access, parking paths.
Parking also.
Yeah, it's not just the scope of work is not limited to the pool itself. This is in collaboration with the Arba application that was submitted by myself and the mayor for not only the pool, but the ancillary features that would help the pool better acclimate to the park and to the surrounding areas and the community. So that is why, just so you're aware, the presentation was, the pool itself, we had an estimate of $3 million. However, when we wanted to really bring it into everything else, the cost was closer to a determined cost of $5 million. Hence, the fee was based off of that desire of work level.
So Mayor, looking at the ARPA allocation, it's a $5.5 million. Is this 450 part of the 5.5?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's forfeit at this point not to exceed. So they would do the community outreach, design, workup, so that those numbers are kind of vague at this point. Just this will enable us to have a firmer estimate in terms of what the cost would be and the scope of the work for the actual project or getting the ancillary undertakings that we may decide to do.
So Aquatica is acting as a subcontractor for design?
Aquatica is their specialization on the areas of swimming pools.
So Saratoga Associate and Design will be the lead
Correct.
design agency?
Saratoga Associate as a prime will work with Aquatic. Aquatic will get the layout of the pool, the pumps, all the code requirements, any features that are interior to the pool walls, so to speak. But once you would get out of the pool, out onto either like the concrete surface or the area that would still be within the fence, that's where like a Saratoga Associates would take off with the landscape design and the site design of it. So the two of them will be working just like this because, you know, the pool is something, the pump house, there's a lot of components to this. Sarah Associates would do the bathhouse, that's not a pool portion, that's a more of an architecture portion. And then how it integrates with the tennis facilities, the roads, the Fair Avenue parking lot, the A diamond, and all that, that's Saratoga Associates. But Aquatica, they have a sub-consultant fee in here. There's also a need to have a survey, that's another sub-consultant fee. So this is it's a layered project that would have several different people working on it. And this is, like the mayor said, to get moving on. The first part is what you saw, everything that you saw was high-level concept, so that we could show you what there is possible. However, we really don't know what we would like to do until we sit down and talk about sizing and programming and really the space of what we like to finally see. So that's what this would be.
Is this going to be a design build with Saratoga Associates and Aquatica?
This would be
Design build?
Not a design build in the traditional sense of what a design build would do. We would design it and then we would bid it.
Okay.
So we are, but that's the next thing. This is getting that jump start on getting design, because if everything goes through the Arba applications and the schedule as we talked about, the goal would be to have some of this ready in the ground for the end of this year so that it can be wrapped up at the latter part, the early part of 2023 for possible use in 2023. So that's why the mayor would like to get this ahead so that we don't lose that time.
Mr. Williams?
So with respect to the $450 service fee, that is a,
1,000.
oh, what did I say? Oh, that's right.
450.
This has been a long day.
Sorry.
So we're getting a good deal.
That's good to come up with you to answer more questions. Yeah.
With respect to the $450,000 service fee, can you speak to Mr. Long or Mayor McCarthy how this entity was selected, and then if other bids were taken into consideration? Because there's no way with just this one estimate to understand if they're being asked too high or too low.
Sure. This is a professional service. The city typically does not bid professional services. So for this particular service, what the city usually does under engineering is I put out what we call term agreements. I have term agreements with a multitude of firms. Each firm is pre-selected. So right now, I'm working with Mr. Colden in the mayor's office. I have term agreements with approximately 9 firms that are pre-selected. We have 2 architects traditional. We have 3 civil engineers. We have 2 landscape architects, and I have a mechanical architect. Those firms are all working with me to supplement my staff, or lack thereof, to get the work done that I need to get done here. So when this project was presented, we wanted to find a specialty. Pools are very special. There are not a lot of pool contractors. So the mayor asked me to reach out. We reached out to Aquatica, who had done some surveys of our existing pools in the past, and we brought them in. Aquatica met with the mayor, myself, and our staff, and they said, listen, we are ready and available to do this work as a professional service for the pool design. However, they said that, you know, we do the pool. We do not do the ancillary. So then I started looking at the best fit for doing the ancillary work. Saratoga Associates, we've engaged them already previously under a previous contract. The contract was for Central Park wayfinding, parking, signage, and paths. That project we worked on with the mayor's office, Chris Vanzana, who was here, and we actually have a report that's already done with some recommended features. I don't know if you've seen it before, but it had some Fair Avenue parking, some paths. And the reason that that project kind of ran up was it done right before COVID, which is difficult, and it was done with a funding issue, which was how do we actually build it? There was a lot of discussion about how to do it, but it wasn't a priority with everything that's going on. So now when this, to circle back to this project, when we got to here, they were kind of a natural fit to bring in so that we weren't redoing things, because we're talking about a location that's central to Fair Avenue, central to the A diamond where we already had them, and their skill set already being for this kind of thing, and we already had them on a term agreement. So that's how we brought them in. But to your point, you're exactly right. We do not have this bid. A typical thing that we do is when it comes to that, to design services on this, we use the rule of 10%. So when I put in the ARPA application, it was, we know that we wanted around $5 million based off of estimates, 10%. The most usually see is 500. I talked with them, we worked out, they said, do you want us to do the survey? Do you want us to do this? And I said, you have to do it all. I don't have time to subcontract the sub. So then we talked about, and we came to this fee of $450,000, which is slightly less than the 10%. And that's, honestly, you're going to get that fee right around there regardless. That's kind of where it is. Aquatica is in there. Aquatica's fee was roughly $80,000 for the pool because the pool was a lesser cost and their design is less. So that's usually how we work with professional services, because to do everything with a bid for the professional services, it would quadruple my workload. So just to bring you up, that's how we are. And like I said, I do have that service list, and it's a 3-year contract that we do with the professional services. They just use it as supplemental. And then we have a whole different thing, which you see, which is federal or state, which we follow different requirements other than our own. So I'm sorry to be long-winded, but I know it's important that you know how we get to these things. We have a lot of, I put in a lot of time working with Andrew in the mayor's office to really get to this, so that we're above board with everything that we do.
Great. I appreciate it. One more question?
Go ahead, please.
And the other thing I'd add on that after they do the design work, that will go out to bid, and then we'll come back to the council for approval.
100%.
Okay. My follow-up question to understanding more that the services that they're providing are with the pool, was that correct?
With the pool.
And ancillary.
And so that's one of the things I just wanted to make sure is this is not just a hole in the ground. We're talking about the pool. It's going to have utility servicing that might not service it already. We're talking about a pump house, a separate building, because that's kind of one of the layouts that we had thought about. A bathhouse that's a considerable size compared to what, we don't have a bathhouse now. Ancillary concrete around the area to service it. Concrete, as you know, is expensive. And we're parking, lighting, possible cameras, some of the things that we're looking at, access paths, so all of that design. So that's where we're segmenting it, but there are a lot of components that are going to go into there. And then as part of this, once again, as part of the discussion, I would like to roll into that ancillary cost outside of the pool some of the work that we've already done, which is wayfinding signage, where you come into Fair Avenue, how to get to the pool, how to get to parking, where Music Haven is, because we've already done that work. And I think it really blends itself in nicely to have that done at the same time. So, yeah, and everything's going to be, we'll discuss it as a group once we have a committee. Everything comes to bid. You guys are welcome to see any of the plans that we develop. And this is a new thing for myself. It's a new thing for this group. The city has not built a pool in quite a while. So we're looking forward to it. But it is specialized, and I don't have much to say about it. But I think we're going down the right path.
So seeking clarification, were these resources taken into consideration other pools there in the city? I say that because we received not a complaint, but an email from a local resident just asking for us to evaluate another local pool resource. And I'd just like to know if it's appropriate to potentially extend this initial investment opportunity to include other areas of the city so that we're not duplicating expenses and resources entirely, if that makes sense.
The front street.
The front.
This is moving forward, though, because of issues that we have with the current pool in Central Park. With the County Department of Health, where it doesn't meet the current standards. So that if we don't move forward in some manner, show them good faith, and we're looking to correct that, it's possible that it would just get shut down and wouldn't be able to use it at all. The other pools in the city have, and we put splash pad, Woodlawn, Front Street. You have to look at each one in terms of what the needs are, and this I again would use more as an example of what we can do or can't do, and then roll it into other projects as we're going through not only the ARPA process, but capital projects that we would look to entertain this year, next year, and a year down the road.
If you want my honest, unsolicited opinion without bouncing it off anyone else, to that end, to what you're discussing, I think it's a great path to go down, but I would recommend that either, you know, the Health and Recreation Committee become involved with also the Parks and Rec Committee. We have in the budget that we're bringing on a Parks Director,
Yep.
and that yourself and the two committees work towards June, when we do the budget for 2023, because I think that what you're gonna find is when you go down the avenue of looking at the other pools, it's gonna blossom into a larger task than we think that for this. You know, this is I think trying to keep it singularly focused and on trying to get these deadlines so that we can get the pool designed and out and ready, and then meet with those groups and reinstate them so that we can focus a little bit better on them. If we find a need, that we could, you know, attack it with more of the capital budget, like the mayor's saying. These are, I mean, the Front Street pool, you know, that pool, we have discussions with development about other things in that area. We have, you know, Hillhurst pool, we have some pools, and they all have needs. And I think if we start, you're gonna see these costs just skyrocket, and you're gonna realize that we're not ready to take all of that on. I think this is, to focus on this one, I think is a worthy endeavor in its own.
Just quick question, can you tell me a little bit more about the deadlines you're speaking of? Because I'm trying to get this done for the deadline.
Yeah, I mean, these are all, I guess, at the time, they're superficial deadlines, but we're really trying to, as you know, we work backwards. So one of the things that we're going to be, once we engage with Saratoga Associates in Aquatica officially, is we always work backwards. So it is, when do we need to have this awarded by? And then, you know, you subtract the months for council, you subtract the month for bidding, you know, so if we needed to have someone in the ground, let's say in October, let's say we wanted to have someone there October 1st to dig a hole, and that's probably too late, so you say September. That means we're bidding in August. And if we're bringing it to you in August. So if we're bringing it to you in August, we're bidding it in July. And that, if we're bidding it in July, that means we have to have the design done by mid-June. And it's January, so that means that we really have February, March, April to get this done, to get all the community involved, to get the buy-in, to get it designed. So our window gets very small. So that's how we usually work back, because, you know, we're a government, we have a bureaucracy to follow, you know, and that's if everything goes well. One of the things we started to do is really delay things so that myself and Aaron and Ron, we could all review and sit down, and that's actually why we started to delay certain things, just to make sure that we have everything, so we're doing it one time and not twice and going back. So, you know, it sounds like to have something ready in September is September, but when you work backwards, you have to be ready to go June 1st, I would say, with design documents.
No, I'm just saying it's your committee.
Mr. Williams, you have any more questions?
I imagine you're gonna ask for a motion. My only reservation is just making sure appropriate considerations are made towards the other pools. I would only hope that time was built in for this to be delayed another 2 weeks, just to allow, and I can accept onus for that, just ensuring that the individuals that voted for me understand that I ran on a campaign of just making sure that information was provided to the members of the community, and that I took the time to actually delve in and make sure that when I did move this forward or second this, that I did that with every consideration and support of this. So with that, I would just like to hold off to allow me the opportunity to do some research.
So you're asking for us to hold off on this until
For 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
So I just,
Ms.
yeah,
Porterfield.
if I can speak to that, I clearly understand what you're saying, and perhaps before coming into this meeting, but given the timeline that Mr. Wallen has given us, and in addition to that, we can't do what you're asking and have people be part of this, is what I'm understanding. So the Front Street, whatever pool is, if we need to look at that, we would not be able to look at it as part of this, just because of what it would entail.
I'm not going to tell the council
Yes,
or the mayor
okay.
what you can or cannot do. What I'm saying is that an ARPA application was submitted by the deadline for an amount of money. And at the mayor's request, we wanted to, you know, accelerate the design portion of that ahead of the process that you will be going through, so that we could potentially meet these deadlines. I did not have it on my agenda or my radar to do the other pools, which it's perfectly fine if someone wants. It's a separate project. It's a whole separate idea, and in the Front Street pool in particular gets into a lot of larger conversations because of a FEMA project that we have going on down there and some of the other things that we've talked about. So I'm just trying to make sure that we're not muddying waters with things that, oh, my mask broke, with the things that we're talking about and holding something up because of that. But I understand if you made a commitment to it, that's perfectly fine. Especially the Front Street pool, it's a complicated situation with that particular pool.
So, Mr. Mayor.
No, please go ahead.
My only consideration is if we already have a company that's doing assessments, wouldn't it be prudent upon us to make or get assessments for other individual pools? Not saying that we're going to take steps to move forward. We have those figures.
Just for assessments. So to bring Aquatica on, ask them, because they've done this once before, but it was about 10 years ago, to have them to come in and do new assessments for the other 3 pools.
Right, that's what I'm delaying the considerations on seeing.
Well, if you want, I'll have them go out and look at what a ballpark figure would be to do those and come back in 2 weeks. But this would still move as a separate project.
Is that something that you want to see happen?
So you're telling me putting it off 2 weeks is going to entirely derail the entire project?
I don't want to be quoted as saying that.
No, but what I'm understanding is that this project would still move forward, but what you're asking would still happen as well.
Okay, right.
Is that what you're saying?
But I'm not going to go to them and have them, this project,
Right.
define the scope of works. If you want the other ones evaluated, I'll come in and get a price on that and come back to you in 2 weeks. And this one is still going to move forward as a separate project. And this is not, again, as has been outlined, it's not a simple, it's not just a swimming pool. Because there's going to be work done in conjunction with the A-Diamond, with the parking lot. The bathhouse will service the needs for the work that we've done at the tennis courts, and then looking at putting some stadium seating on the tennis courts on the back, because we're eliminating the tennis stadium for the site for this pool. And there's some modifications for the disc golf course that plays through the park.
So Mr. Williams, you want us to move forward understanding that in 2 weeks we'll have a price analysis on the cost to fix, repair.
Evaluation.
Well, I don't know if I have the ability to go out and do the evaluation. I don't know if we would have all the scope of works in the detailed analysis in 2 weeks, where it's hard to do some of it now where there's frost in the ground and other things are shut down.
Good, Mr. Farley.
So just for my own clarity here, so we're not suggesting that in 2 weeks' time that all of the other pools are assessed. I think, or you're saying like in 2 weeks' time to get a commitment or understanding with Aquatica to see if they have the capacity and ability to do it.
Well, I come back and have them give us a price, because we've asked them to do this evaluation, so come back and say, is that going to be $10,000? Is it going to be $20,000? Whatever it is, to go through and look at those as they have started the process on the one at Central Park.
And we'd be dealing directly with Aquatica for that type of evaluation. That would not be Saratoga Associates. So we would have because we're talking about specifically the pools.
And what might the cost of that be?
For the evaluation?
Yeah, anything?
I think the mayor was fairly accurate. We had them look at the Central Park pool. It does not take them long to look at deficiencies. They check pumps and code and deficiencies. So I don't think it would be a huge number. I think under 20,000 would be totally reasonable we're just talking about 3 pools. Central Park, we've already kind of looked at. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's under that quite a bit. But would you like to have, I can get a proposal. They're a small outfit that's local.
Please, go ahead, please.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
I think if we're going to do it, though, we should include, you know, those places that have
Splash pads.
the splash pads, because I think the splash pads are a great alternative as well. So, I mean, this is sort of a longer term.
Evaluate the
analysis.
splash pads?
I'm just saying, no, I mean,
I think what
opportunities for, you know,
I think that,
Separate things.
because
Separate.
correct me, that aquatic uses the term water features.
right.
So it
okay.
could be a swimming pool, it could be a slide that has water on it. There's things that are quite creative.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, rather than put pools or, you know, there might be a broader project of getting their analysis of what they
Well,
think should
and
happen.
Aquatica as part of this package is going to do the outreach for, like, working with the Boys and Girls Club, curb
Right.
users, neighborhood associations, get the community input in terms of, again, what people are looking to have at the facility. So that can be done. We moved a little bit on this, so I feel comfortable with what's before us, but we have to go back and get other numbers
Right.
and better define a scope of works, whether it's just the other swimming pools, or whether you would look at other places where we put or evaluate potential, either what's there now or potentially place water features.
I think that just for clarification, my intent was just to see if we can maximize and see if there were other abilities to just benefit from the entire city. But I completely understand, thank you for all the input. So I can make a motion to, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah, if you're comfortable to move, let's move forward with it. With the understanding that these things are going to be happening in the next couple of weeks.
And I say 2 weeks, it's actually because of the fifth Monday, it would come back to the council in 3 weeks.
Sweet. Yeah.
I'll move it.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Mr. Walker.
Thank you. The next item is the 2022 budget reappropriation. Mr. Ferrari, and you're going to stay there for a while.
I'll be here for a while.
Good evening, Council President, Council, and Mayor. The first thing on the agenda is a 2022 budget reappropriation. And what we're requesting here is, because of the time to manufacture products, in the 2022 capital project, we have requested 4 garbage truck compactors and a street sweeper. They have estimated the manufacturing of these to be 18 months or longer. Now, usually what we do is we go out to fund these projects through bands or bond anticipation notes, and usually that doesn't happen until May. What we're asking is to speed this up by moving money through our appropriated fund balance to cover that up until we borrow the money in May. So we can order these trucks now, so that we'll get them in some time in 2023. And if we wait till May, we probably won't get these trucks till 2024. So we're just asking us to, up until May, to move money from our fund balance into the budget of, to transfer to other funds, so we can start the process of ordering these 5 vehicles, 4 garbage trucks and a street sweeper.
We can't spend money unless it's been budgeted. And the normal process would be go through the bonding process before I can order the garbage trucks.
So we
and
make sure we have the
street
cash, we want to make sure we have
Right,
money before we do that.
sweepers. So if I ordered the garbage trucks today, and then the council decides not to bond in the spring, then we're stuck. So what this is saying is that we're gonna pay for this one way or the other because of the long lead time on these vehicles.
And we're hoping that you pass this so that we can do that, so we can get these products.
Is there any commitment on the timeline?
Excuse me?
Is there any commitment, a form commitment on the timeline
Is there a
to
commitment?
get these trucks?
Well,
Is there a
as
certain
soon as-
commitment from
As soon as the
them?
Yeah,
council moves
well,
ahead of this,
they had
then
told
we
us it'd be
place the
a
order, then we'll
minimum of
actually get-
18 months to manufacture. That's the minimum. So we know, what we're trying to do is save 5 months of time to get it within 2023 instead of 2024. And we plan, as recorded, we do plan to borrow capital project money this year anyway, so Once we get that money in, we'll just move it back into fund balance.
Yeah. Any questions, comments?
I'll move it.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
The next item is the 2022 budget reallocation pursuant to agreement between the City of Schenectady and CSEA.
I'm gonna pass out the cost of all this reallocations, so that you can look at them, or you can use that smart.
Well, we'll put them over there.
Yep. So you can look at, so what we're talking about. So, as you recall, the council itself has passed several, you have enough?
No.
Just one each, right?
Go ahead. Do you have one, Mr. Holden?
I'm okay right now, I can always.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, we're good.
Okay, so the council has already passed and appropriated monies for the different unions that we had the agreements to. So we're looking to appropriate those funds for the agreement. So the first one we have here is the CSEA for 2022. But let's go back to CSEA for 2021, which is a part of this. If you look in the patches I sent you what are the cost for the total for 2021 and 2022. For 2020 and 21, because these are retro payments that we've done in the negotiations, and the contract went back to 2020. So what we gotta do is do retro payments to the union members for 2020 and 2021. But according to government standards, we have to show those expenditures and those costs in 2021. So what we have to do, because that money was not appropriated through the budget process, because we were negotiating all that time, this is the requirement to appropriate those funds from our balances to the budget to pay for them. This is the plan. The plan that we use, is to use our lost revenue through Arba federal money. So as you can see, what I sent you in that little package over there, we have for 2021 we have retroactive payments for management for CSEA for 2020, CSEA for 2021. 1037 for 2021, and operating engineer for 2021. The total amount with FICA, that is a process that I met, and I put it on the sheet. Can we put that in the resolution with the FICA amount?
Yeah, let's
If I send it to you. That total for all of those budgets for 2021 is $617,689.94 for all those budgets for retro payments for 20 through 2021. Whew, that was a good one. Now for 2022, we have reallocations for the management, CSEA for 2022, and the operating engineers. Now when we were doing the negotiations and the budget for 2022, we had anticipated the budget for...
Can we do each item individually, because we have to pass them? Yeah, we have to pass them individually, sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Let's do item
I was trying to
number-
explain the whole thing,
Yeah.
but then I was going to pass them.
Let's do,
Okay, so we did the number five.
number 5.
Yeah.
Let's talk
So,
about number 5 and
we're
then move to
looking-
number 5.
We're looking for the 2022 budget reallocation for City of Schenectady and CSEA according to the budget passed. That total for 2022 is $347,994 plus 30,000 in 30,000 in FICA. So you have the total budget right there.
That 30,000 covers more than just CSEA.
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm
So
sorry.
it's the CSEA 2022, the 347,944 plus whatever that FICA
Okay.
percentage is,
Sorry about that.
right?
Yep. I do have that number here someplace.
So whatever that percentage is, 7.65%.
Absolutely, that's what it is.
Any question on item number 5?
I will move it.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Item number 6.
Number 6 is the amount we talked about for CSEA for 2021 for the retro payments that we charged in 2021. I explained the amounts there. Any questions on that?
Move it.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Okay.
Item number 7.
Number 7 is, this is the 2020 allocation for the operating engineers. The operating engineers, again, was passed for retro payment for 2021. Came to 18,000 plus the 7.65% for FICA. Any questions on that?
I'll move it.
Second.
Thank
All
you.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item number 8.
Number 8 is the 2022 budget allocation for the city of Schenectady and the operating engineers for 2028. That's a 41,478 plus this FICA
7.8.
budget.
I'll move it.
Any que-
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item number 9.
And the 2021 budget reallocation for the 1037. That again, as you recall, is up here. That is a total for 2021 for the retro payment of $296,390 plus the 7.65% for FICA.
Any question?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Number 10
Number 10.
is the agreement between the city of Schenectady and the city budget, the city management team. That was a 2% increase from September through December. That came to 18,353.65 plus the 7.5%.
I'll move
Any
it.
discussion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Number 11 is the 22 budget application between the city of Schenectady and the city management benefits for 2022. That came to a total of $9,409. That is the difference in the reallocation of the longevity numbers. That'd be 9,000 plus a 7.65% for FICA.
Any question?
I'll move it.
Second.
Okay.
All in favor? Aye.
All right, and I just want to say the total for both 21 and 22 is going to be $1,047,031.51. I'm going to probably come back to you in another 2 weeks with the fire department. You think these numbers are big?
Oh, stop.
So, yes.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Other than the fire department, are all the contracts settled for all the labor unions?
All labor union contracts are settled. The only one that's close to being finished is the police department is December of 2022, which will start in 2023, the next negotiations. Probably earlier, but everything else is good through 2024, just about. Yep.
And-
Any other?
Yeah, well, another quick question. You said that you're going to come back with the fire department?
Yes.
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 And so there'll be some using ARPA funds as well. So this is not
Yes.
the total amount of ARPA funds?
No, this is not total amount. This is, like I said, our plan is to use the lost revenue from our ARPA funds, which later on I'll give you the whole breakdown of that. But our federal funds allocation for lost revenue is $8,922,683. So that's $1 million of that right off the bat right there.
Okay, so 8 million something, okay.
All right.
Any other business before finance?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank
You're
you.
adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Rory.
Okay, so I'd like to call the Government Operations Committee. We have 3 items on the agenda. The first of which is we're going to have a discussion by Mr. Carl Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Farley. So my subject line is hosting quarterly city hall and city council and committee meetings outside of the city. Since attending these meetings, I've never once seen them filled outside of special resolutions or considerations for individuals, which is understandable. I also understand that we are currently in the middle of a pandemic. However, I think we need to address certain transportation issues to include time restraints from individuals like myself who isn't able to get home. And I understand that we have our time set and that's something that we need to work around. However, I think identifying locations throughout the city to traditionally host quarterly meetings, I think that is something that we should research to potentially have meetings in other areas of the city so that we are moving City Hall to the people as opposed to having the people only be able to come here if they're seeking information. Although it includes a virtual component, there are some members of our communities that do not have access to internet. So I think if we're truly being here to provide a service to the community, this should be something that we should take on in partnership with OSM to make sure that we're able to still host the virtual component for individuals that prefer that long term.
So yes, and, you know, I've had other people also talk about this, and I really don't think I think it's actually a good idea that we come outside of City Hall walls. Right now, we do it when there's a special thing, when we just had to, like a tour of sorts, to do the ARPA presentations. So to do this quarterly is to me, is not a heavy lift, and, you know, there's a lot of municipalities or elected individuals who do what they're called town halls. So I think that it's actually a good idea to, you know, I know that some of us attend meetings for different neighborhoods, but however, that's the agenda that they're putting forward. But so I think it is a good idea for us to be able to bring ourselves to the people on a, like I said, are you suggesting a quarterly basis? So just, you know, 4 times a year, I don't think I think it's actually a good kind of a public relations kind of thing in terms of us as electeds.
Any other discussion on that? I guess I would just add, I think that it's really, we were sending a strong message around making plans with people and not for people. And I think that this will, you know, there's a way to demonstrate that commitment that we're not only going to be, we're going to honor and be who we say we would be, but we're being flexible and responsive to the needs of the community. So I think it's definitely a worthy discussion to have. And I'm interested to hear if anyone else has any.
I'd like to ask, if we were to pursue this, I'd want to make sure that we were also including security issues around actually we just left, I think, but we have police officers or off-duty police officers or auxiliary police officers, as well as the metal detector and other types of security as we have access to here. I think is important as one of the considerations. I also have to say that I do think it's important as sort of City Hall, as the center of government, as the center of our democracy here in the city, that personally I like the idea that we're here for our meetings. I also will throw out, just as another consideration, if this discussion continues, to return to the discussion about the time of our meetings, which we did start earlier. We discussed the idea of, you know, perhaps having all of our meetings at 5:30, which would give people the opportunity to be able to come right from work rather than go home and have to come out late at night on a winter's night, for example, to go home and then come back. I think is really discouraging to a lot of people. But I think that Mr. Williams's point about COVID certainly has affected our attendance, because I think at least before COVID, we definitely had more people at our meetings. So I think that there's probably that aspect too. So we'd have to also ensure wherever we moved the meetings, if we were choosing to do that on a quarterly basis, that we'd be able to do the distancing and have the checks and all that kind of stuff as well. So those are just my comments, my initial thoughts.
I don't see this as something that we can do right away. I mean, but I think it's definitely something we should consider. And I understand the seat of government, but I also understand engaging the community, because when we want to, that's what we do. So I think that this allows an opportunity for us to do both, because we will continually, without question, have our meetings here. That's not even an option. We'll definitely do that. But this is just like 4 times a year. Let's do something and let's be out there. And I think that we do see specific people. Let's just, as it comes to our council meetings, it's like generally we know who's going to be there, who's not going to be there. And this probably will, I believe, will open it that we'll see more people than we would normally see to come here if we were out in the community. So I think it's worth discussion and maybe even trying to implement. I understand the security issues. I'm just not sure how we address them in terms of metal detectors. I'm not sure how that happens. Because I don't know that they're portable. I don't know
if they're portable or not.
I guess they use wands. I don't know. So, but I'm certainly open to continuing this discussion and seeing how we could plan that out.
Yeah, for example, we've tried some meetings in the past in the community, have been pretty poorly attended. Have council meetings been done in the past outside of City Hall? I think that's perhaps has happened. Mary, you would have maybe better regulation.
As long as I'm a councilor, I don't think
before, I think they've had them.
There have been times when they've gone to other places, but it's been more of a rarity than a regularly scheduled. And generally, when things are going fairly smooth, everybody's doing a pretty good job, you get poor attendance. When you get a point of controversy or some public debate, then attendance goes up. And so try to keep that in the back of your mind of where we hold a meeting. We're going to have a bigger event and there's more things going on. You have to be more selective. The other side, you could be more informal on some of it. You may allow for just better discussion and more interaction with people.
Sorry, I had a couple other questions, but go ahead.
In concurring with Ms. Patrick, I think an earlier time, especially for seniors, and we did discuss before we got on the council, of a 5:30 for everyone. Something where, again, maybe even 6 o'clock, people are on their way home from work, they stop, they don't have to come back out. I think that's a good idea. And City Hall being central to Schenectady, and on bus lines, within walking distance, should we enter a facility that's not on a bus line, where someone from the north side couldn't get over to Bellevue? So at least here we're central. I mean, that's my only take on everything. So I just say we remain where we are. And we put ourselves out there to the constituents every day via our email. They can email us, they can call us, they can send a letter to Sam, which she's written, and all those things can be addressed. And I understand that, and I'd love for our meetings to be, I would like the whole city to come, to be honest with you, and tell us what they want. But anyway, that's my take on it right now, is that.
Yeah, back to the security issue, that's one of the things that people for years were complaining about, is the lack of security here. And now that we finally have it, I think that's an important component. But the other questions I have is how many people would this negatively impact? Because this is a central location. So if we move a meeting to, Woodlawn, will people who would traditionally come here go to those meetings? How many would be negatively affected, I think, is something that we really need to consider. Is there a real want for this? I've seen this building packed with people, and people will show up when it's something that they're fired up about, I guess, for a lack of a better word. And so I think those are all things that we need to have in place before we even consider something like that. On top of, are there legal issues? If an employee goes and gets hurt off location, what's the ramifications for that? So I think there's a lot of things that really need to be buttoned up.
So when we had the opportunity to invite the Belmont football team to celebrate their accomplishments, it was so inspiring to see that many young people in City Hall. Growing up in the city, I couldn't tell you where City Hall was. And it wasn't until I began going through my professional career that I understood that it didn't require me to become a homeowner to be vested in my city politically, that it was important to be involved from the ground up. So I do think that having these meetings in Schenectady High School, in the Boys and Girls Club, where there are individuals from the community that feel comfortable going to those places, that this is appropriate for us to at least make another attempt. And I don't know if community organizational leaders were collaborated with, but I assure you that we are, with this coming year, having these ARPA conversations, having these police reform conversations, that we are working in unison. And I think it is prudent, I'll use that word again, for us to re-engage this topic when we are all vested in understanding the importance of working together this year.
I'd actually like to directly respond to that, because that particular meeting with those young people that were here from the Belmont Top Warner and the cheerleaders, was pretty much my favorite meeting so far. And while I was sitting there, I really thought about the fact that it was so great that they had that opportunity to come to City Hall and understand that we have this place that is part of our civic engagement. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is really awesome that all of these kids who maybe would never, ever have stepped foot into this building are getting that chance to be here with their leaders, with their political leaders at a local level. And be able to embrace and understand. I mean, when we all stood together and did the Pledge of Allegiance, for example, I mean, it made me start to cry to hear all of those kids in unison in this sort of, not, you know, I don't know the right word, sacred's not the right word, but to be in the chamber for me was really impressive, and I was thrilled. I mean, I went home actually and said, it was so great to know that they probably never would have had that chance on a day-to-day basis to actually be at City Hall, and hopefully that would inspire them to think about coming more or getting involved, maybe running for office, etc. But I also want to comment on something that Ms. Porterfield said, which I think, in thinking about this item, getting ready for tonight, the idea is also that we do have all the neighborhood associations, and we do have a number of other meetings that many of us attend on a regular basis. And I hear, so I think that was a good point as well, that we are out there in the community trying to listen to our neighbors, trying to get their input. At a recent, I think it was Upper Union Street Neighborhood Association meeting, they actually invited the mayor and Mr. LaFawn to come in and talk about issues that were affecting that neighborhood, which actually ended up being a lot about the Central Park issue as well. But it was great to be able to be there and be so, you know, listening to all of their input about what they wanted to see happen in their neighborhood. So I do think that that's another opportunity, at least in the short term, for all of us. And I know that we all do that. We all go out and attend these meetings. So that is also another avenue for getting the input and being around our community, in our community.
So I just want to add a point of clarity in terms of the young people coming down here. And the reason that they came here is because there was a council member who was engaged with the community that somebody reached out to and said, this is what's going on. So it's not like they just decided to come. So to Mr. Williams' point, I think us being out there more allows them to see we are out here, and then there's opportunity to come here. So I think there's definitely an opportunity for that give and take, for us to be there where they assemble, wherever that is, and here as well. So it didn't happen just out of the clear blue sky. They thought, oh, let's call the council. It's because a council member who's engaged with the community was contacted by a community member because of engagement. So I think that's where we're trying to get here, is that we make sure that the community is engaged, is with us on a basis where they feel that comfort level. Because I asked the question of the young people, have you been here? Some had and some hadn't. So I think that we're trying to get that community engagement that we talk about so very often, and just this is one of the other ways we can consider trying to get there.
So if I could share my thought around all this, I think that this is kind of one of those situations where a few things can be true, and I think that to your point, if those young people, this was their first time coming to City Hall, I think that that just highlights an area where we have to be not afraid of better. To how do we create opportunities for our younger people to walk through City Halls, and they don't necessarily have to be here to receive a resolution, but to just because they feel, because we're intentionally being inclusive and making those efforts. And I also think that, the heart of our city is in our neighborhoods. So the more that we, as a government body, are present in the neighborhoods, then that doesn't just, foster just engagement, but what it does is it demonstrates and it helps us. I think it helps us have a better picture of what's happening in the neighborhoods, and that presence right there works on a couple of different levels. So I think that we're not, if I understand correctly, we're not saying that we're going to not meet at City Hall, or we're not going to it's not an either or type of situation, it's more of a yes and, so we're gonna continue to meet here, but we wanna be able to not allow the tradition to stifle innovation. We need to get out there in the community, and I think that there's a lot to be said for us doing that, so. Any other discussion on that?
I think we're just continuing, visiting this and see how we can do it, considering all of the things that have been brought forth as concerns. And so I think we'll just have to continue to discuss it. I don't know that it needs to be, it's up to Mr. Williams. This is his item, about 2 weeks, but I think it warrants more discussion.
I guess it should highlight what we saw in the ARPA, around these ARPA conversations, or around the ARPA funds, when we was going to all the neighborhoods. Right. That was like, I was there for most of those conversations, and they were extremely well attended. And I think the mayor and the staff did a wonderful job. Doing some Q&A, got some real authentic conversations happening with city residents. So I think that, and I don't know that same level of organic exchange of ideas happens in City Hall, and it might kind of change the dynamic a little bit. But I think that was some really valuable interaction I was having with city residents. So I want to commend the mayor and the city team for doing that. And I think that kind of lends to your point, Carla, that this is something that we should really be considering. So thank you for that. Okay, so next, I'd like to put forth a ceremonial resolution to acknowledge Black History Month. Black history is world history. It is American history, and it certainly is City of Schenectady history. So I know this is something that happens every year, and I just think that that's something that we need to acknowledge in a very meaningful way, not just though this is a ceremonial resolution, not just from a performative space, but really as we acknowledge in Black history, how do we make sure that the decisions we make today on a range of different items that will be before us as a governing committee, that we uphold the principles for the people who have come before us and made such great sacrifices, people of color. So with that,
I'll move it.
I'll second.
So
Okay.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, so next on the agenda, I'm going to give this over to Mr. Andrew here, so you can talk a little bit about reviewing section 138-30 of the code, the city of Schenectady.
Thank you. I know there isn't anything attached to this. I did have a chance to speak with the city clerk earlier today. I believe, and I know some council people reached out to me with questions, concerns that they may have related to amending this section of the code. There was one written submission for the public hearing from the concerned citizen. I'm happy to address any questions or concerns that any of the council people may have. Otherwise, I would request that the ordinance as presented in the public documentation move forward.
So I just have a question, hopefully it's appropriate for this room right now. Would you mind clarifying the post and pre deprivation that was highlighted as an issue?
The what? I'm sorry.
The post and pre deprivation that was highlighted as an issue?
Sure. From a practical standpoint, when a code enforcement officer goes out to a property to do an inspection, he or she obviously does an inspection and may see conditions that rise to the level of, and when I say conditions and being violations, which rise to the level of the necessity to issue an order to vacate. At that time, the officer doesn't just provide, a notice of the violation and a notice that I'm going to be issuing an order to vacate, which could potentially give rise to what we would consider a pre-deprivation hearing. Instead, the officer issues an order to vacate because the conditions rise to that level of putting people in peril, and issues the order to vacate. What we would be doing is offering a post deprivation hearing, in which within the time frame given in what was presented, an aggrieved party, could be the owner of the property, could be a tenant, requests a review of the order to vacate. I think we have it now, the way it was proposed, within 3 days, they can submit their request, and then within a certain amount of time, the city would provide a hearing to review the order to vacate. So that would be a post-deprivation. Now, it should be, mentioned that generally when the city issues an order to vacate and we placard a property and provide notice to the owner and any tenants, we don't physically, unless in maybe a rare circumstance would we physically remove people from a property. We're providing them with notice, we're providing them with information related to services so that they can get the housing that they need in the interim. But a lot of that, falls on the responsibility of the property owner to make sure the tenants are leaving, and the tenants themselves to leave. Generally, code enforcement contacts social services to see what type of temporary housing might be available. But again, this is more of a post-deprivation opportunity for, we're going to provide we'll try to assist in providing housing, but also the hearing that would be in place would be post-deprivation, not pre-deprivation. Does that address the question?
100%. I just thought the clarification was warranted for anyone that might be listening.
Sure. Yep.
So when someone is, there's a notice to vacate right now, when in that 3-day period for them to kind of request a hearing, they are, once you have a notice to vacate, the expectation is for you to vacate immediately, though, right? Or is there?
It's meant to be immediately. It's meant to be immediately because when an officer issues that order to vacate, it's because there's a condition at the property in which it's dangerous for somebody to remain there. And certain conditions, may necessitate certain actions by those tenants. Some people may take a chance and continue to stay there. We don't chain up the property, so somebody may leave and then come back. And also there's an opportunity for people to go and try to correct the violations. A property owner can go back and correct the violations. We allow for that because we want them to abate the violation. So they can go back in there. The idea though is we're not keeping tabs necessarily after hours to see if people are going back and staying the night. That's a tall task for us to accomplish given our limited capacity.
So, I'm just one question. So, any on the notice to vacate or any of the paperwork that's given to a tenant or a property owner for notice to vacate, is there any kind of legal what the recourse? What happens if I'm a tenant and I don't vacate? Is there
An order to vacate is a lawful order. So when a code enforcement officer or the building inspector issues an order to vacate, it's a lawful order. The way the code's written, and this is the property maintenance code, somebody could potentially be removed from the property. Now that potential exists. Now the city, as far as I know, since I've been working for the city, I don't know if we've exercised that in my time where we've, removed somebody. But the potential exists because if a property is unsafe, we want to make sure that we are protecting people. Which is why, there's this opportunity now. It's the balancing here, right? Protecting people, giving them the opportunity, making sure that they're safe, and also recognizing that, people could potentially be getting kicked out of their home because of this unsafe condition. So we're trying to balance that in a way by giving people this opportunity to be heard after the orders is issued.
And then one more question I want to go to Doreen. So, and right now how it's written, if someone's it could be not conditions right now, I think are pretty demanding. But if you're if someone it's in the middle of the summer and someone's power's cut off for failure to pavement power, is that right now do I understand correctly that would be a reason to vacate? That the code enforcement would say, right now you don't have power in your home and this rise to the level for you to vacate the premise?
I can't speak for the code enforcement department and, what would trigger an order to vacate. I generally would be of the mind that if there's no power to a house, that an order to vacate should be issued. There are certain, minimum requirements that are a necessity for living in a house, right? So right now, in the middle of winter, for example, if the heat doesn't work, I would suspect that an order to vacate should be issued. However, if that condition existed in the summertime, it might be a different determinations made, given the circumstance, right?
So, Mr. Cullen, so if, for legality, if we issue that, and does it take away the code knowing about something so we're not held liable should the building fall down on top of people?
So the idea behind we issue an order to vacate, obviously, there's a protection to the city if, when we issue an order to vacate, right? The idea is we placard the property, we recognize that it's unsafe. Somebody decides that, after the order is issued, I'm gonna stay here. I would submit to you that they are assuming the risk in staying in the building after we placard the building and deem it unsafe. The idea with the hearing is to obviously give people, those folks who are aggrieved, an opportunity to be heard on whether or not the order to vacate was properly issued, if it should have been, maybe it should have affected maybe the entire building, but only one of the units, for example. It gives them the opportunity to be heard. As I said, I think our code enforcement department errs on the side of caution to protect the public. And given the circumstances, at 3 o'clock in the morning, for example, to issue an order to vacate for an entire 2-family structure, but then give those folks who are aggrieved an opportunity to be heard maybe a couple days later to say, I live on the 2nd floor, this shouldn't have impacted me. It gives them an opportunity to be heard. And if they feel, even after that hearing, that the order to vacate, let's say the order to vacate is heard by a hearing officer who says, no, it was properly issued. There's a next step in that they can seek, redress in Supreme Court, which would be filing an Article 78. It's an administrative process. So, I don't want you to think that, after that initial hearing, giving them this hearing, that is all that they have. They have an opportunity to be heard beyond that. So, we're trying to provide, again, the opportunity for people to, I guess, seek redress, seek review of an administrative decision that happens, in a moment, so to speak, right? Where somebody gets called out in the middle of the night because there's no heat, for example, officer goes out, issues an order to vacate, there's no heat, and then redress can be sought, by a tenant or an owner saying, no, it shouldn't have been issued because, whatever the example is, or it shouldn't have been issued on the entire property. So this is just creating a roadmap for people to have their voices heard, give them an opportunity to seek redress, and really, I think, foster better communication between the city and why we do what we do, and those people who are impacted by the decisions that we make out in the field.
Absolutely, thank you.
Any further discussion on this? Okay, so I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So we
Gotta
have to
move
move
this
that.
item.
We have to move that.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay, I asked for a motion.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. And
So
then,
now I ask for a motion to adjourn, please.
so moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We adjourn.
Thank you. Call to order city development and planning. We have 13 items on the agenda. The first, here's Ms. Giada's up for the first 4. Actually, the first one is lead agency for a seeker and 30-day comment period regarding the rezoning of Barrett Street and South Avenue. Ms. Giada.
Thank you.
So the Department of Development is requesting the rezone of approximately 3.9 acres of land from R2 2-family to this C4 downtown zoning district. Avi is passing out a map that shows this area, which the R2, the currently zoned R2 area is directly adjacent to the C4 downtown zoning. We're making this request because there are constraints as to how these properties can be used. And just given its proximity to downtown, there's a lot of non-conforming uses within many of the parcels within the zone. So when we're trying to look at a comprehensive development strategy for this area and some of the projects that are, happening and some of the things that are currently in as non-conforming uses, that is what is sort of behind this request. It's also kind of mid-block where the R2 kind of comes in. So the block is kind of split between the C4 and the R2. So we're just requesting to basically extend that C4 as it's outlined. And I don't know if you want to explain a little bit more. This is Avi Epstein, a zoning officer.
So the first page on the maps, that's just an outline of where the zoning is. What you see in the yellow hash marks there is what we're proposing to rezone to the C4. So that's currently the R2. You can see to the south of that kind of where the alley is. That's about mid-block where the zoning changes from the C4 to the R2. The second page in that packet is it shows the conformance with the allowed uses that Kristen was talking about. So you can see the ones in blue do conform with what's currently permitted, the ones in red do not, and the ones in yellow are just vacant lots right now. Two of those were recent demolitions. And then on the third page, this is the conformance with lot development standards. So that means things like the setbacks, the required frontage of the properties, how large the properties have to be in general to be buildable. So most of these structures predate the existing lot development standards. So if you were trying to build something now, you wouldn't be able to in most of these cases. By changing it to the C4, you would allow for a greater use of the properties and it's really just making it easier for comprehensive development since it aligns with the zoning just to the south of it.
So anytime there's a rezone, it's kind of a process. The city council kind of can declare the intent to act as lead agency, there's public hearings, and then you refer to the planning commission to make their recommendation. So it's kind of a little bit of a process. This is the first step in the process. But before we ask for that, is there any questions?
I think, Sam, were these made available on the site? Okay, so I'm not sure you can pass these out at this late point.
This map was attached in the first map.
Yeah,
The second.
Was it?
Yeah.
The top map is, the second is it?
The other
Here.
two,
The top map is there.
The other one's what?
So in relation to that first map that's in our packet where it says that AIK proposal, so where is that on, so that's a proposed project. So where is that on here?
It's what's highlighted.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. All right. So right now you're requesting for us to become the, Mayor, you have some concerns regarding this?
Or technically, I don't know if this was made available 24 hours.
This one, the first map wasn't Miss
The
Michael?
first map I thought was.
Just the first?
The second 2 pages is the question.
Yeah. And that was just additional information that we thought might be helpful, but the first map is really what the request is.
Correct.
So the second map is more of just supporting information that shows conforming uses.
So this is what we're acting on, this map?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So are there any further questions or comments or concerns?
I'll move this.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Ms. Dia, our second item on the agenda is the call for a public hearing.
Yep, so in relation to the same thing, this is for the city council to call for a public hearing for the rezoning of approximately the 3.91 acres.
Any questions or concerns? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, third item on the agenda is Barrett Street and South Street Avenue rezoning. Planning Commission referral.
Correct. A resolution referring the zoning amendment proposal to the city planning commission for a recommendation.
So once we get through our process, you're just asking now that you'll be ready to move it on to the Planning Commission.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions? Mr. Tony?
Clicked in.
Hmm?
I said it finally clicked in.
Okay.
There's no dates.
Is this solely being done for the development projects that are kitty corner on South and Barrett?
No. That's definitely part of the discussion on this. But it's beyond that. It's looking at what makes sense for this area that's so close to downtown with the changes that are happening there and how, you know, we can just have a more appropriate zoning, for it.
I guess my follow-up question is, why now? Like, this has been forever.
Yeah.
So why now?
This has been something that we've discussed previously, you know, in relation to just some of the, there's barriers to kind of like infilling some of this area. And as you know, with the Live in Schenectady project and a lot of the voids in the neighborhood, we want to make sure that we're able to do the infill development there, and that we don't continue to have voids where there, you know, there could be potential, you know, benefits to the neighborhood. So.
Oh, Mr. Rivera.
I have a question related to item number 2 that we just passed. There is no date for the public hearing in this resolution here?
Oh, yeah, well,
Are we setting it standard?
Yeah,
that'll be on the next
Following
cycle.
the standard?
Cycle,
Okay.
right.
The regular public hearing. So we'll get the date on there. And are there other questions regarding the rezoning and referring it to the Planning Commission? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So,
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, fourth item on the agenda, to accept 13,000 grant award and to create historic. Ms. Diaz, oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Epstein. That's okay. Okay.
That one.
You need it? Get it?
Yes, here it is, yep. So this was a $13,000 grant award to create historic design guidelines through the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. So these guidelines will be used to provide information and guidance for residents who live in historic districts on the different criteria that's evaluated when they, you know, make a change or make repairs to their properties. So it kind of would just give more guidance for the Historic District Commission to, I think, kind of be less subjective and have criteria and guidelines around the way that they're making decisions, and also making that information available to the property owners and residents who live within historic districts. So the recommendation here is a resolution from the City Council authorizing basically just the acceptance of these grant funds, not to exceed $13,000, and authorize the mayor and or his designee to enter the agreement to effectuate this resolution.
And just for, further clarify, the only required match is like the $1,600, $1,700 in form of staff. So there's no cash match.
Correct.
Match. Okay. Yes, Ms. Patrick.
I just wanted, so if we move forward with this, we then would probably though have an opportunity, it would come back to council to approve whatever the design guidelines are that are developed.
The design guidelines would then become part of the zoning code, and I believe we would have to come back to get those adopted. So this would just be to kind of start that process, and then they would have to be added to the zoning code.
Mr. Farley?
Oh, but yeah, I was just, my proposal, because there are existing guidelines right now, right? Right, so, and how is that different?
Yeah, there are, and Avi might know a little bit more about this. It's just very broad.
Okay.
So a lot of the language that's currently used is really just like from this, it's not specific to Schenectady and to like the things that we have here,
What
so.
we have in the code right now is fairly general. Really specifies of what, certain terms, but it doesn't define everything. It doesn't provide as much context onto like what characterizes certain historic areas within the city. The design guidelines, so we have design guidelines for like Upper Union corridor. So they are referenced in the zoning code so that they apply. But the body of that language isn't actually in the code. So we just have a section that says, these guidelines are applicable. So something similar would have to happen after we were to create the design guidelines, where there's a sentence that refers in the zoning code to the design guidelines themselves.
Other questions? Okay. Entertain a motion to accept the grant?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Don't go. Yeah, so I'll call you that. Oh, okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is the discussion of the review committee for the Arba application. So just, I'm sure you all know that we, we're getting 53 million, half of the money we have already received. And part of when we were doing our tour, we, I'll say continually advocated to try to have people included from the community in terms of our review process. So this is what this is about, putting that committee together and what that looks like and how we do that. So I'll ask Ms. Diaz just to tell from the development department where they are with the applications right now, the number, the amount being requested, the amount we basically have to expend in this particular round.
Sure, so we've been kind of going through, and the mayor can probably explain, more along the lines of like the amount of funding and stuff, but right now we've received, I think it was just over 70 applications, and we've kind of just been categorizing them into different, basically just different categories. So we have like the arts, youth, workforce and economic development, facilities and infrastructure, food and health, and then housing. So we've just been kind of working on getting those into categories to be able to evaluate internally. So we did come up with an internal kind of like just criteria to start to look at the applications and do that internal evaluation that we can then use to make recommendations around, the projects that we think are suitable for the funding. In terms of the amount available, I would defer to the mayor on that.
Mr. Ferrari?
I'm here to put together some of the amounts that we're already allocated with the city council and what we have spent. I did this really quick, so that's why there's not too many titles on here.
Okay.
So it was passed out. The first column, as you can look at, that's the amount of the budget amount that was allocated. The 8.9 million, the lost revenue, the 2021 job allocation budget, Boys and Girls Club, on and on. And the bottom one, 4.6 million, that's for the 2022 budget that was allocated. So that total right there is 15,255,000. The second column, 784,000, is what we actually have spent so far from up to today. I put a balance in there, but that balance is really, not there because, like I said, so, like just today, we just passed that $1.9 million budget for the loss of revenue, and the COVID job for 2022. We haven't even started yet. So that balance, the one to really to look at is the 2021 budget allocation for job retention, because we actually went through. So far we've designated 1.4 million. We definitely know we spent 523,000, but as we go through the period for audits and stuff like that, when we redo it. So this was a kind of like spur of the moment thing. So that 900,000 is we figure is about available to move on to next year or the next process. So far, we did receive $26 million, $485 and $899, and we're due to receive another $26 million in May of 2022. So we figure totally between those two amounts, we should have about $38,646,000 to allocate.
So this year.
After we receive the money in May of 2022. For this year, with the $26 million we got right now, we're looking at $11,230,114 plus the other $908,000 where I think we're going to have available after we do that. Gives us a total for that first thing of $12,138,114.
Okay. So that's, what we're talking about in terms of these applications, but the application amounts are well over.
It's close to 80 million in ask.
Right, so right now there's 80 million in ask. So just wanted to, give you that background. And also, all council members received an email on January 6th, which gave us links to go to what the final recommendations or final ways that we could use the money. So there was, everybody had access to that. And I believe we all actually also got the email with listing from Mr. Sutherland, listing the projects. Did everyone get that one? All right, so listing the projects and what they were. So this is where we are now. And so getting back to, and obviously once we get there, that'll all go through finance in terms of us doing the funding, but working with the Department of Development. So having said that, we will try to get community engagement on this. Mr. Mudabaran, do you want to talk about the steps that you've taken so far?
Oh, yeah, thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I had the opportunity to reach out to the Schenectady United Neighborhood President, Tom Carey, and he was willing to help us to get all the neighborhood leaders, a representative from each of the neighborhood. We're actually compiling that list now. We should have it in a day or two, and able to present it to the entire council in a couple of days, of the names from each neighborhood that will be part of this advisory group that will help us to review these applications. I encourage the council, if you have any names, please submit it to Madam President.
Yes, because at those meetings, there were some people right in the room that said, I'd like to be a part of it, that aren't necessarily connected to neighborhood associations. So what Mr. Carey has submitted to us, and let me just say, he couldn't come tonight. He wanted to be here on his own to have this discussion. However, he came in contact with someone who was positive with COVID. So he's in quarantine and chose not to come here, which I'm very happy about. Even though he tested, he did test, but he wasn't positive, but erring on the side of caution. He's quarantining, so that's why he is not here tonight. So I'm not sure if you're here. Okay. But he did reach out. He did submit some names. There are other people who also would like to, be a part of it. Some of the questions that he said, there's a number of questions that came through what their role would be, and there's just a number of questions. So there's a lot of things the council have to work out along with the mayor and development to work what the parameters of review would be. So I think that's where we are now, just developing this committee and how the application process in terms of review would work, how many people would be on the committee, and what their roles and responsibilities. I had some brief conversations with the mayor, so we'd work with the Department of Development how we make sure that that we not only have people that are interested, but also people that have that skill set. And I mean, you don't have to have a degree in reviewing grants or have done it, forever or something like that. But, having input from the community, I think is vital and important, which is why we're going down this road. So right now, we're just trying to develop that committee to move forward and us to, I'm not sure what our timeline's going to be, in case that's a question, but as quickly as possible to organize the committee to talk with the council and together us, be able to review the applications and allocate the remaining funds. Are there questions, concerns, Mr. Palomini?
Yeah, a couple things. First, I find it very troubling that the organization was approached before the council even discussed whether or not we would put together a committee to look at the applications. That, to me, is very troubling, that the council as a whole did not discuss and approve that. So that's the first thing. Secondly, it's my understanding a committee list has already been submitted and is going around.
There's some names that have been suggested, that does not make up the committee. That's what we're here discussing. Those are names that were submitted. And at the last committee meeting, we did talk about it, and so no, we did not take a vote on it, but certainly there was discussion that there will be a committee put together.
It was discussion, but the idea was for all of us to come together and decide whether or not, and I don't really have any particular problem with having committees, but it was decided based on one or two people to do this. And that, in my opinion, is incorrect. It's just not right. And so moving forward, hopefully those discussions do happen in public so that the entire council can make that decision together so that we can have a stronger process going forward. And I will say, I have received the email that the committee has been decided, and maybe not fully, but there's certainly neighborhood representations.
That have been suggested.
They call it the committee.
Oh, well, they can put whatever name on it, but that decision, as I'm saying here today, is a decision that we make. Because there are some people who have asked to be on there who are not on the list of people that have been suggested. So that is not a done deal. It is absolutely not.
The first step is to even decide whether or not we're going to have a committee before we even decide who's on the committee. And that had never been done.
So if you feel like that, I feel like that we were through that process, but if you feel like we haven't, there's certainly discussion we can have. It's something that was advocated for, so, and I think we should move forward, but if you feel like we need to make that official motion in order to do that, then certainly let's do it.
Yeah, I do, because it wasn't this, we talked about possible things that we might do. That was one option. It was never decided, except for in the minds of maybe two individuals. And that is not appropriate in my mind.
Well, I think it was the mind of more than two, however. So if you want to, at this point, discuss whether or not we need to have a committee, we can have that discussion now, and we can, yes, Ms. DeToro.
Hi.
Hi.
President Porterfield. So anyway, if it was discussed in the mind of more than two council persons, who were the more than two? Because I know I wasn't approached at all regarding regarding.
Well, I brought this up at the last
I know
meeting.
you have been advocating it for it.
And no one said no.
A lot of, right, correct. I know the mayor said something like, well, that's up to the council. That was all that was said.
And the
It's up
last
to
meeting
the
I
council.
said, we'll go ahead, we'll go forward and start looking for it. I said that.
I didn't hear that, I'm
And so-
sorry, but I was never approached. So who was
And here's the
approached?
opportunity at this point. What I said is, Mr. Mudavan asked some other people have come to me. And what I'm saying that this is not a done deal. And that if there's names, Mr. Mudavan said, if there's names that you would like to submit, let's do that. Yes.
Well, you actually had your hand up first.
Okay, you go.
Well, I do want to say, seeing a list of names that have already been submitted via email as a committee, and I hear what you're saying. I want to make sure, I think that we're way a few steps back before we do actually have a committee. Because I think there really has to be guidelines. I think I expressed after our meeting, last time, after our committee meeting, first of all, that I thought that it wasn't really appropriate for city development and planning, that it was more appropriate that this agenda item go through finance. I know that Mr. Mudavan agreed with me on that, but that was after our committee meeting last time, just because it is the appropriation of money. I felt that it was more appropriate to go through finance. But I also feel that, given the fact that among all the projects on that list are many city projects that, I know I'm going to advocate strongly for, some of the city projects actually happening. Right now, we're at about, I forget what he just said, a little bit over $12 million that we will have left in the first round. I think there's close to $80 million on that list. I think we have to really take a step back and make some decisions about, if there is a committee, which projects are the committee going to look at? If there is a committee, I want to really make sure that there's nobody on that committee who has, already submitted letters of support for certain projects, might be involved with certain projects. I mean, I think that it's rife, what's the word, rife, with the potential for conflict of interest among that. So I think we have to really be careful about that as well. And then I think that there's projects on the list that don't fall into the guidelines of the ARPA funding, and which also might overlap with potential for CDBG funding. So I want us to really have a conversation around that as well, so that we're not putting out to a committee all these projects when in fact some of them wouldn't even be projects that we would consider funding through ARPA.
Yeah, so that's not the plan.
I'm just saying, these are all the things I've been thinking about.
And which makes sense, absolutely, all makes sense, which is not the plan. We understand that in-house, we will have to make those decisions, and once we decide which applications will be considered, the committee then reviews the application. So we would do that work. And as you said, you've looked at the applications, and some of them clearly, it's not gonna be 70. 70 will not be the number, because some of them clearly, even just looking at it quickly, you'll realize like, well, no, we can't fund that. So that kind of work would be done, as it is done, in-house. But the committee would then look at applications that met the criteria based on, we know what the criteria is, we all have the documents, the Department of Development has the documents, and then they would be reviewed. So this discussion today is just talking about how we put together, the committee together to do that part of it. The committee does not make the guidelines and stuff, all of that belongs to the city. The committee does not do that. So I just want to be clear on that. Mr. Farley?
Yep, well, you kind of clarified the point I was going to make around what the city owns as far as.
Right.
I don't know that this is the appropriate time to kind of raise this concern and kind of request for some thoughts around the extending the length of the application process. I just think it's important that we recognize that this was a really tight window during the pandemic and during the holidays for a lot of people. And so I think that as we figure out, is there going to be a committee or not, that's something that, we should probably factor in. I also think that the final guidance was released on the 26th, I think, when did we get that email?
So the email came on January 6th.
January 6th. And that was after the application, the initial application closed. So I think that, thinking about the public and as they get information and kind of determine whether or not projects that they have in mind fall under the what was permissible for these funds, then I think that we really need to be really, really intentional about considering extending the application process as well. So,
Mr. Williams?
So I can speak in to address just the previous issues that were spoken to. I think, in recalling, I think I've only missed 2 or 3 of the neighborhood meetings and conversations regarding this topic. Looking at the final rules that were put in place with this money, one of which is fighting the pandemic and supporting families and businesses struggling with its public health and economic impacts. Singularly, one of the issues that was continuously brought up at every meeting was the involvement of the community and having oversight from individuals outside of our chambers. That was the expectation that I continuously heard. So even without further review, I would expect us to adhere to the public's cry to have a voice on this council, or to have a voice in these conversations. Addressing the second concerns where if issues were noticed with the creation prematurely of us having these conversations on the city council, I would only ask that when those were recognized, that I don't know if opportunities were made to reach out to Council President Porterfield to provide some clarity before this evening's meeting. But definitely I don't find any issues or ill will with them seeking recommendations. I understand that there may be displeasure with individuals choosing different language that is not in line with their intent, which was just getting recommendations to bring forward to the council. Unfortunately, I imagine I can't speak for what someone else said, but definitely the topic was to review the committee assignments, and I'm confident that Ms. Porterfield was here to review any issues, or not any issues, but any recommendations that they were bringing forward. So to answer Mr. Conley's question, I didn't find issues with anything that was conducted before this meeting.
Mr. Farley?
I think the one way we can kind of like be a little more efficient in the process is look at what's done, look at the facts. Is there a committee? Have we formed a committee right now? No, that hasn't happened.
People
right?
have submitted names.
All right, so then clearly that hasn't happened. That decision hasn't been made. So I think that can kind of alleviate any concerns around decision being made unilaterally or with just one or two council members. Like that didn't happen. So.
Mr. Palmer?
I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying. However, the email that was going around was they were asked to create a committee, and they have done so. This was never decided by the council as a whole. I don't have an issue particularly with a committee being formed. The issue is we did not discuss and agree to that as a council. It was done by a few individuals, and those individuals contacted Sun, and Sun was asked to create a committee. They sent that out with individuals as, here's a committee. Now, there may be additional people, but that's what was going around. That's the problem I have, just to clarify. I do take your comments well-intentioned, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but there's an appropriate process, and it wasn't followed. That's the problem.
So let me ask Mr. Moody, did you ask them for names, or did you ask them to create a
I
committee?
specifically asked to submit names so the council could review.
So if there was a misunderstanding for his ask as opposed to what was given, that's a different conversation, because my understanding, there is no committee. There's simply names being submitted, put forward, and as I said, there are other people whose names are not on that list that I know that have reached out to me that have said, I'd like to be a part of that. So that to me is not, the committee is not being formed. And to Ms. Patrick's point, this will be a two-pronged process, as I said. We're working, this is city development planning, so the city development planning committee is working with development to make sure that we get the process in place, and then the applications themselves will be financed, yes. So it's, let's just be clear that this is something that has never happened in this city before. So are we creating guidelines as we go? For some of it we have to. So if there's been missteps, I apologize for that. However, there's no ill intent. The only intent is to make sure that the city residents' voices are heard, and that we try to the best of our ability, make sure that happens. So, so at this point in time, I will have a roll call for those who are in favor of creating or not creating a committee to review the ARPA applications, so that we make sure that everyone is on record to where they stand on this particular issue.
Can I just ask one more question?
Certainly, go right ahead.
And I know I'm jumping the gun on a straw poll here, but because I also would love to be able to, if we are going to have a committee, then I think each of us should be able to also submit names and,
absolutely,
of people that would be on the committee as well. So I just wanted to make that clear as well.
That was made clear, that was stated. And in addition to that, if I didn't say it, it certainly was in my mind that we also have to, we made it 40 names. Are we going to have a committee of 40? Chances are absolutely not. So then we would have to look at the names that are submitted and say, this person, yes or no. So we would have, those are decisions that we would make based on what's the information that's provided to us.
And just one more comment, again, back to Mr. Williams. I mean, we did all attend all the neighborhood meetings that were very productive meetings, as Mr. Farley noted, that the mayor and city staff ran, and got a lot of input. I mean, I took pages of notes on what our community members want to see happen with the ARPA funding. So I think we all, and I know I missed one of those meetings. I think probably all of us missed maybe one meeting, but for the most part, we were all there and heard from that. Plus, we had the survey as well that was done to also solicit community input. So it's not like we had a closed process even to this point in terms of what we did to try to solicit community input. And I shouldn't say we, the city, the mayor. solicited a lot.
I think you could say we as a council attended, and we certainly encouraged people to come and put the information out there, so I think we is appropriate. So is there further discussion? If not, I'll have the clerk call the roll on this particular issue.
Point of order here. This it doesn't, this isn't a roll call vote, we're in a committee meeting, so it's within
So
your
we'll
committee.
do a straw
Straw
poll.
poll.
Straw poll. Did you have something, Mr. Williams?
Yep, so I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight Damani's previous comment. Hopefully you didn't feel like I just overemphasized it with potentially reopening the application process.
Oh.
I've had considerations myself. I want to put it on record that I definitely appreciate everyone who was able to meet those deadlines. They were definitely during the heightened stages of our pandemic. They were during a holiday season, and I want to applaud everyone that was able to submit that on time. However, I think having it, unfortunately, at length of further discussion, I think we should open to understanding potentially having it extended to incorporate individuals that weren't able to meet those expectations. And what I want to say is I don't think it's done at a disservice to any projects that currently were submitted, because I don't want it to be seen as if we're competing against each other. This is money for the community that's going to benefit the community. And I think if we start to look at it as us competing against each other, I think that'll negatively pit us against one another, which is essentially what could potentially happen. So I think if we look at whether extending it, even if it was only done from a standpoint of for the duration of the creation of this committee, my recommendation would be opening up for 2 weeks. If that is a cause for concern, definitely understand. I don't want to do it to the detriment of people that have already submitted projects. But I definitely agree with Mr. Farley's comments of some people missed out due to unforeseen issues.
Mr. Farley?
And I want to just again highlight that the final guidance for what the money it can be used for came after we closed the portal for people who want to submit. So once again, you know, if we are in a position where we're getting new information, and the public has new information, then there could be potentially some people who might have put an application in due to the final direction and guidelines, but before that information was made available to the public, just didn't think that their project would fit in. And I had a question, just like, what's the usual length for like for our community block grant money? Like, what's like usually the
RFP?
Yeah.
It's usually 5 weeks.
So five weeks.
Like we put it out end of January, it's usually in by March.
So that's
And then we have the review period and all the public hearings and stuff.
all right. So and how long was for the Arba funds?
It was the month of December, I believe.
Yeah.
So it was 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
Right.
So I think so. Kind of to highlight the fact that the community block grant money is something that happens annually. So there's like some expectation that this happens. This right here is a one-time opportunity for us. So I think that it would be really wise of us as a council to say that we at least give the same amount of time that we give to the community for something that is where people are relatively can expect that to happen. And I think that this is a really good opportunity to make sure that we are casting the widest net we can and look for opportunities to collaborate with the members of our community.
Matt?
Well, just in terms of that window of opportunity, we went out and did the community meetings. We're telling people, telling groups what the potential areas were, wanted them to think about it, had them talk about some of their goals, desires. And I think we were actually live before December 1st, so it was, you might be arguing about days, even though we had talked about opening it up. It was getting the site up and making it live. And you have to remember, this is the first round of Monday.
That's right.
So still looking to do this one more time when we get the money expected in May.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to, I'm not quite sure how to position it. So we get other applications, who's going to process those, who's going to rank them? Is the city council going to take care of that?
No.
I think it'd be the same process.
I've put criteria in place, assign staff to do it. I have other things, I have to manage the day-to-day operation. So if somebody brings in an application now, is that going to get, talk about people who are going to be mad because everybody else did meet the criteria, and this one is out there. In the final guidance, there was not a dramatic deviation from what the preliminary guidance was, so that I don't think there was anybody, from what I saw, and I had not read every application, that would have been precluded or opened up, and based on that final guidance that came out of the Treasury Department.
Ms. Patrick. Ms. Patrick.
Yes, sorry, mask. I have to say, with all due respect, and just now putting my professional hat on as opposed to my city council hat, having been a grants developer for 40 years, it's common to have that kind of a length of time in order to be able to submit a grant. There were many other grant applications that were also due on December 31st to nonprofits. The United Way, well, no, not the United Way, but there were other applications that we had to get in by December 31st. I think it would be unfair, really, honestly, if I was somebody that put in a grant application and I heard that the process was reopened, I would really be upset, because I think it would be like, basically, oh, you guys all got it in on time, but now we're going to open it up again. We already know that we're not going to be able to fund most of the applications. So now we're going to be even like trying to get even more applications in that we'll have to say no to. So it's, again, all due respect, I hear what you guys are saying, but I think it would really be unfair to the folks that are.
And then Mr. Budgetary.
We tried to make that application process fairly simple and straightforward, so we weren't looking for reams of information, other things.
Right.
We may go back to some of the groups now and ask for more documentation as you go through this review process to make the final decision. But again, it was to get things in there conceptually and be able to work with groups, some who were maybe more informal. This might be their one and only time applying, as well as other ones who, on a routine basis, either apply for CDBG money, other money from city, other entities. And I think all in all, it went fairly well. It's a number of applicants there that put forth some interesting ideas and concepts, and I think it reflects well on the community as a whole. The problem is now there's always never, the newcomers to the council will learn that there's never enough money to fund all the things, and you have to go down that narrow path of trying to keep as many people happy as you can and leverage the dollars to get the biggest impact.
Mr. Budgetary, did you have a point?
Two-part question. Ms. Diaz, did you receive any application after the deadline?
No, I don't think so. Dan?
Well, we closed the portal on Monday. So there was a couple that came in over the weekend. We took them in.
Asking that we missed the deadline, that it closed?
No.
Can we submit?
A couple people asked if there would be another round, and, did ask about that.
Next year.
This year, though.
For
the next round.
But, I guess, just kind of, from my perspective, I think that I'm also, if we have $80 million in ask right now, and we know we can't fund most of the applications, I am concerned about that. Not to say that, whatever the process is the process, and whatever is decided is decided, but I am worried about the amount of ask, the amount of good projects. There's not that many that are disqualified, I can tell you, that wouldn't qualify for the funding.
Okay.
So, it's gonna be a question of how do we make those decisions? Because it's already.
Just a follow-up question on that. We talk about rolling some of these applications into CDBG, or they can qualify under the CDBG. Mayor, did we receive a number in terms of how much we're going to receive with regards to infrastructure money? Because some of these applications I've gone through, scan across, some might fall into that category.
It's possible, and we don't have a
We
number
don't
on
have
that.
So we have to look at that too also, the CDBG and also the infrastructure money that was recently passed on these applications here.
Mr. Farley?
So a few things, so you're saying that when, after the portal closed Monday, you got a couple applications in?
We told people it was going to close December 31st. We
Okay.
didn't actually close it until January 2nd, 4th, 3rd, 4th.
Whenever it was, it came back.
Yeah. So we did receive some during that period of time.
Okay.
There was nobody that called up and said, we did not submit our application, we submitted it at this point in time. If we had, we would have taken it and then deferred to the group here of whether to accept the application or not, but we did not receive anybody stating that they were not able to submit an application.
Right, no, my question was more specifically, so the communication was that the portal will close on the 31st, but it didn't close on the 31st, and we received a few applications after the 31st. And the portal.
And they were noted, if you look at the spreadsheet, the date that we received it was noted there, so you see that we did receive a couple on January 2nd and 1st.
Because the 31st was like we were out of the office. I think it was just open until the Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Technology.
So it was like
Business day.
My question is, if the application came in after the time that we communicated to the public that we were going to close the portal, we did accept those applications though, we did?
We did, yep. We didn't,
Well,
there
they
has
got-
not been any applications we've outright rejected. There was a couple, somebody did call about some things that were located far away from the city. We told them, I mean, you can apply, but you probably wouldn't qualify. But other than that, we didn't reject any applications we received.
So are you suggesting, Mr. Farley, that if it came after, that we say you missed the cutoff date and not accept those applications?
What I'm kind of trying to note here is that we're saying that, to kind of Ms. Carmel's point is that if I'm somebody who got my application in, and then somebody else does it, and I feel like it's not unfair, I think it could be unfair for me, and, I think that the larger point that I'm trying to make is that this is common, working in a nonprofit for a long time myself, I know that it is a common timeline, but as a governing body, we have an obligation to recognize that these are uncommon times. So when these being uncommon times, our opportunity to be responsive to the community and to ensure that we're casting a wide net. And even though we have, I think, Mr. Mayor, your point is well taken. We're never going to have enough, right? So, but when you want to be equitable does not matter how much you have. It's the process of what you allocate and distribute. So we could be equitable with $10 million or $1. And I think that what we need to do is just make sure that we're considering the fact that this was during a pandemic, this was a short timeline, and there was further guidance that came out after the portal closed. So even though it wasn't maybe a dramatic shift, there was still more information. How can we expect the public to make a determination on whether to submit something if the guidance came out after we closed the portal?
But I have to say, to the mayor's point, the guidance didn't change a lot. There was not a significant change. And I don't know which applications you're talking about, if any in particular, because I didn't see a lot of change in the guidance. I don't know if any of you had an opportunity to look at it. There were not major shifts. No. Mr. Williams?
So just, I don't know if it was mentioned or if it was implied, but I thought we should at least credit your staff, Mayor McCarthy, for taking ownership of this huge ask. Hopefully my comments did not recognize that this was like a monumentous project that you guys did successfully, and I appreciate all the work that you did. And if we choose to move forward with another application process, it's going to be these lessons learned that improve it moving forward. So I just wanted to note that.
So at this point in time, so we can kind of bring this to a close, I think there's a couple of questions that we have to ask. The first one, and just get the pulse of the council. If the first, that we're in favor of creating a committee that includes neighborhood representatives to review the application. So just want, so we just poll the council.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Farley?
Yes.
Ms. Patrick?
I would say yes to the applications except for the ones that were submitted by the city.
Mr. Muthuvaran?
Yes, but this is something that when we went throughout the city, when Mayor McCarthy had meetings, the Arba meetings, it was something that the community wanted. All the neighborhood, it was echoed across all neighborhood. Community involvement. How can we participate in helping the city council, the administration, in terms of coming up with ideas how we spend this money. So I think it's not new what's happening. It's something that they were asking for, and we're actually doing it. It was something that was discussed. Some of the council members were not here. It was thrown out, but it's something that we brought with us from all these neighborhood meetings, and it's something that we're trying to put in place together. And I encourage everybody to get on board and submit names, and we can come to the table and flush names out if we want to select a workable group, not 40 names. I'm just using numbers, but something that we can all work for and towards, and get a group that help us, manage and able to discuss and come up with ideas on how we able to look at each of these applications and come up with ideas on how we can able to fund them. And I agree after Mayor McCarthy says we can open up the application process when we receive our funding in. So there will be opportunity for others to resubmit or submit applications during that process. We have to look at the logistics too. Be fair to the staff and, going back. Application is already in, paperwork with us. Let's move on what we have. And when the next round comes, we'll encourage who didn't submit on time to encourage them to reach out to them and to make sure that they submit application on time. And I'm in full support of getting this advisory group together to help us move this forward.
Thank you, Mr. Toro.
I'm in support of a committee, but I would really like some guidelines before we even, on what the committee's job will be. Absolutely, we're our neighborhoods. We all live in our neighborhoods. We want to spend our money in our neighborhoods. But again, as the mayor said, we want to get the most money. We want to get the most out of what money we have.
Sure.
So as much as I would love to help everyone, I want to know more about what this committee's going to do and who's going to have the final say. So and so if I bring 10, there's already 10, 12 on a list submitted, 20, 30, 40, 60, 100. Who's gonna interview these people? I don't feel confident enough to interview someone and say you're not qualified enough to make this decision, when none of us really are at this point because everything's so new. So I'd like some guidelines on what this committee's going to be.
Absolutely. That's part of forming a committee. So as I said, this is all new territory for all of us. But we still have an obligation. And so we're going to put together a group so we can meet that obligation.
Mr. Palomini.
I want to be clear, I have no issue with public involvement in the ARPA money. Absolutely none. It's been said many times that at the meetings, people wanted to be involved, and that's a great thing, and I'm happy for that, and I want people to participate. However, this was decided before this meeting, and the email says we have, as requested, we have put a committee together. We have assembled this committee with 9 names and are ready to work with the council to make recommendations on submitted projects. That's just not right for any of us. I don't care who we are, it's just plain wrong. So I'm voting no out of principle, but I want to make clear, I have no problem with public input.
Yes, and as I said before, the committee, to me, has not been determined. Names were submitted. So, again, if there's a misunderstanding communication on what was asked of the people who were asked, but there is no committee that has been fully completed. That's why we're having the discussion tonight, so we can move forward with that. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
And we also remind the council, who's pointed out by Mr. Wallen, that we have, over the last few years, put together lists of professional individuals or groups who, they're not on formal retainer, but we have agreements that if we need them, it's a predetermined rate. So if we need an engineer, they'll provide it at a certain rate. If we need an architect, we can get it. And so those resources can be made available. And again, we're not quite that far in terms of the internal review. Do we need some technical assessment? And some of, I don't want to belabor it because the meeting's running on.
Okay.
A lot of these are very good groups, well-intentioned projects. I worry that some things where they've had ideas and thoughts out there before where there were cost estimates that they had come up with a couple of years ago. Those may not be valid today because we've seen costs go up, the disruptions in the supply chain. And so, again, you may have something that looks good on paper, you think it's well thought out, and then when you actually go to implement it, it won't be the numbers that the assumptions were there. And we have to make sure that we're going to do things that are in fact going to be meet the goals under the federal regs, but we're also be able to make the timeline to put them in place. And so some of those outside firms we may have to bring in to do again that assessment to make sure that everything will move ahead in a smooth and straightforward manner.
Well, thank you, and I'm sure that we will need those resources, as I said, as we go through this uncharted territory. So thank you. So it looks like there's a majority of the council who's ready and willing to move forward with having this committee. The second question that was raised by Mr. Mr. Farley was whether or not we should reopen the application process, and I'll also ask the council to weigh in on that.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Farley.
Yes.
Ms. Patrick.
No.
Mr. Mutaveran.
I'm going to vote no on it. I just mentioned that, we got to be fair to the staff who did all this process and get it to us where it is today. The process is going to reopen back when we receive our second set of funding. So I encourage, and I will do my part to make sure we reach out to who didn't submit, so please submit and get your application on time. And we can, consider those applications in the next rounds.
Mrs. Toro.
No.
Mr. Palomini.
No.
Ms. Porterfield.
So, as we discussed this, I have to, first to, for the people who put their application in and did it on time, I think we definitely have to respect that. And even if this request had come several weeks ago before we really closed the portal, then I could support it. But I just think for people who did their due diligence, got it in, and did what they're supposed to do to open it, puts them at a disadvantage. And I'm going to be frank, if I were on the receiving end of that, I would not be happy. So just have to be 100%, and I understand. And so we need to do a better job of maybe getting the information out there. Whatever it is we need to do that. Again, it's a learning process for us. So, but I would have to vote no. I could not support reopening the process. The staff has already done a tremendous amount of work in putting the applications together and all of that. So at this point in time, I cannot support that. I will, however, say that we should really look at it, considering opening our next process earlier, so by the time the money hits, the application's already there and reviewed, and we can move forward on a more expeditious manner.
Madam President, if somebody is aware of somebody who didn't meet the timeline, I'm more than willing to review it. And the other thing is that we're debating, or I shouldn't say debating, because we're all one big happy family. We're discussing the options for this one chunk of money. There are other funding streams that are out there. As Mr. Mutaveran pointed out, is the infrastructure money, there's other things from the state. So county has some money, and so if somebody's aware of somebody that didn't meet the timeline here, that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be other scenarios that we might be able to point them to again, have a worthwhile concept, project, or idea flushed out and developed in a more robust manner.
So it looks like, you know, there's not enough support to open the process, but there are other opportunities to do other things. All right, so we will move forward on, you know, sending out information to, I'm sorry, Mr. Colvin. Yes.
Sorry, I just want to, I know there was a straw vote on the advisory committee, but there wasn't if there's a request or for a resolution here, there wasn't a motion for one in a second, so I just want to point that out.
So let's do that. Let's so I'll need a motion to.
Do we need a resolution?
If you're going to establish an advisory, I
Okay.
would recommend that that's the process that you do, so it's
Okay.
clear.
All right. So you, okay, so
I'll move it.
okay, Ms. Patrick?
Oh, who's-
It's my committee.
Second.
All right, Mr. Linderbaum, second.
I was just thinking about, any committee that is created.
I'm sorry?
What about the ad hoc committee?
About the what?
Ad hoc committee. Do we still have to do a resolution?
Well, this is
Or
a,
like
you can
Official
establish,
committee.
you know, this is to establish an advisory committee. And within that, you know, obviously, you know, you're not establishing a set number.
No.
You're establishing, you know, that you haven't actually established, I mean, you haven't really, you're establishing a committee without actually saying what that committee is going to be made up of.
So I think we just generally say to review the ARPA applications, we would, you know, we would have to leave it very open and not put in numbers, because we don't know those numbers yet.
Correct.
We just know we want to establish a committee.
So I'm a little confused now. I mean, should we be moving it or not be moving it? This actually, the legislative request form was that the recommendation would be the city council work with some and other community groups to identify individuals to be part of a team that works with the city staff to review the application.
My recommendation is, if you're going to have these outside groups or individuals review applications that were submitted to the city for the purpose of providing advice to the city council, that is done by resolution, because this information is something that, given what could be in the applications in terms of identifying information and so forth, I would suggest that it's set up through resolution and not ad hoc.
So we did move in second.
You moved in second?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Thank you. So we will get those emails out, and we'll get that resolution done and get the emails out and work towards developing that committee. So thank you for that very robust discussion. And hopefully, Ms. Farley, you'll reach out to the mayor and to the Department of Development to see what other opportunities there are to get funding. All right, the final remaining items are all on property sales and will therefore be in executive session. So members of the public will...
Make a motion to go into executive session.
I'll make
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, we're in executive session. And let's see who's here. Oh, this- 9 o'clock. It feels like 9 o'clock.